Framber Valdez almost threw a no-hitter. We'll talk about it on Fantasy Baseball Today. I'm Chris Towers here with Scott White. And Scott, we'll jump right in today on today's show. We're going to talk about Tuesday standouts. We're going to fire up the dropometer. Hopefully I've got it working with Frank out of town. Got some top IL stashes to talk about. But first, the Olive Garden breadstick of the night, it's got to be Framber Valdez, right? At least if we're going positive. You know, you mentioned one guy who was very bad as a possible Olive Garden breadstick, but we'll stay positive at first. Framber Valdez, like one pitch away from the second no-hitter of the season for the Houston Astros, ended up giving up a two-run home run to Corey Seager with 2 outs in the 9th inning to go 8 2/3 innings, 1 hit, 2 earned runs, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts. Look, the strikeouts, not super impressive, but he continues to lead with that curveball, generated 16 swinging strikes in this game, got a ton of contact, soft contact in this one, and he's been pretty good all season. There was a little bit of bumpiness in like May, I believe, maybe June, but otherwise, he's been really rock solid all year. And before this start, he had 40 strikeouts in 31 innings in the month of July since making the switch to that curveball heavy approach. How are you viewing Framber Valdez the rest of the way?
I mean, not that differently. He's already pretty high end. That's the thing. I mean, yeah, it was a great start, but does the analysis really change? Not for me. I mean, Framber Valdez is capable of great starts. We've known that for a long time. His updated numbers in the 5 starts now since he began throwing his curveball 35 to 40% of the time, a 2.41 ERA, a .89 WHIP, 11 K per 9. Better than we've known Framber Valdez to be. Is that who he is now? Probably not. I still think he's going to regress to his usual self here to close out the year, which is still great, which is still basically must start in fantasy.
Top 25 starting pitcher rest of the way?
Yeah, I did just update my rankings today. Do I have him in the top 25? I mean, if I don't, it's just because there are so many pitchers who could fit in that range of the rankings. Let me pull it up here. Ooh, I have him 31. But
that feels a little low.
I could be convinced to move him up 6 spots.
Who would you rather have rest of season? We'll just move into my oh my goodness gracious player of the night, which is kind of a negative one after I said we were going to be positive, which is Seth Lugo. Who would you rather have rest of the way, Seth Lugo or Framber Valdez?
That's a tough one. I guess Valdez. I guess it's easier to say based on how Lugo's start went this time, which wasn't very good. Of course, his previous start was 1 earned run in
8 innings.
Only
3 strikeouts, I believe 3 walks in that one. But yeah, the 8 innings of 1 earned run is impressive.
Yeah, no, I mean, and here's the thing. So his last 5 starts, Seth Lugo has a 4.54 ERA. But that includes the 1 earned run in 8 innings. That includes the 1 earned run in 9 innings during that 5-start stretch as well. So as brilliant as those 2 starts were, it says something about the other 3 starts. And it's the overall ERA during that stretch is bad. It's 4.54. So the regression is happening. Doesn't mean there aren't good starts along the way, starts that still make Lugo worth keeping around. But it does appear that ERA is coming back down to earth a little bit, even if it's kind of taking a winding path there. So it's happening right under our noses, the regression.
Yeah, a big part of being a good analyst, I think, is knowing your biases or whatever you want to call them and being aware, trying to avoid confirmation bias. And so, like, we are going to do a dropometer segment later in the show. And I pointedly did not include Seth Lugo in that list, even though I have been very, very skeptical of him basically all season and would not be surprised if he has a couple more bad starts. And we are talking about dropping him. 3.85 xERA entering this one. He gave up 4 earned runs in 5 1/3 innings, by the way. 4 walks, 4 strikeouts since July 1st. So I think that's 6 starts. So it's including one more start than the one you were talking about earlier. 4.31 ERA, 26 strikeouts and 39 2/3 innings. And that's the concern here is early on in the season, he was getting really good results, but not a lot of strikeouts. May and June actually was like a strikeout per inning, was awesome. Since July 1st, the strikeouts have not been there. I guess the one thing I would say is like I wrote about both Chris Bassitt and Seth Lugo in the newsletter, and Bassitt was better today, but overall, lately they've been very similar. And I'm much more optimistic about Chris Bassitt because I think his baseline is higher, or at least it was coming into the season. So again, trying to avoid confirmation bias there.
Yeah, I mean, Bassitt hadn't had a good start in a long time.
Oh, it had been a while, yeah.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I'm more optimistic about Bassitt than Lugo. In fact, Bassitt, I know I moved down in my rankings. He's 74th now for me. Maybe I should move him up a little after this start since it was so good. I had dropped him behind guys like Tyler Anderson and Jameson Taillon, who have pitched well, but I don't really believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hassle with starting pitcher rankings. You know, they can just yo-yo constantly if you let them. I delayed the big move down for Bassitt, but it had been so long since he had a good start.
All right, let's talk about your, oh my goodness gracious, player of the night.
Okay. My goodness gracious player of the night is Vinnie Pasquantino. Vinnie P, baby. He went 3 for 4 with a double. It's a good game. He's been good for a long time now, like really, really good. Surprisingly good. Somehow I hadn't noticed how good Vinnie Pasquantino had been. In his last 36 games now, including this 3 for 4 performance, last 36, 340 batting average, 9 home runs, so a home run every 4 games, an OPS near 900. This started in late June. Basically coincides with the ball carrying a little better across the league, home runs spiking across the league. And maybe that's what's feeding into this for Vinnie Pasquantino. It's not like he's hitting the ball harder on average. It just may be that the reduced threshold for home runs has benefited him as much as any other hitter. I will note, okay, so he's homering every 4 games. He's hitting 340. How is his OPS right around 900? Shouldn't it be higher? Strangely, Vinnie Pasquantino has only walked 4 times during that 36 game stretch, which is very out of character. And I don't think is going to be a trend. He's obviously a guy who takes his walks. But I am encouraged by the increased power for a guy whose skill set I've always believed in. And as long as the ball continues to play like it's playing now, I think Vinnie Pasquantino is going to be a pretty good option for you.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned, I don't know what exact date you're going back to. Was it the 24th of June? Or was
Whenever
it
the good hitting started, yeah.
Yeah, because he hit a home run on the 24th of June. He had a couple of 2-hit games right at the end, 2 home runs in his final 3 games. What's interesting, though, is July he had a 717 OPS despite hitting 309 because, like you mentioned, 2 walks in 100 plate appearances in the month of July. Only 2 home runs in July. So it was like he hit 3 home runs in the final like 7 games of June. He has 4 in the first 6 games of August. And that's carrying a lot of the weight here. You know, we did a what's wrong with Vinnie P like a week ago discussion. And it was because the power had just been completely non-existent for the previous month. And he's just had these outages over the course really of his whole career so far where, you know, whether it's the home park, the fact that he pulls the ball well, but maybe doesn't totally optimize exceptionally well, like hits a lot of balls to right center, not just down the line. I don't know exactly what it is, but there have been these extended droughts. Sorry, there's a possum on the field in Los Angeles that just caught my eye out of the corner because that's the one game that's still going on. Excuse me. Excuse me to the possum as well. Mind your business. He's trying to get out. It's amazing. All right, he's gone. Back to the show. I don't remember. Vinnie P goes through these stretches where he doesn't hit for the power that it feels like he should, but do you still think he should be a 25 homer guy? You know, he's on, I don't know, probably like a 22 homer pace right now.
I mean, there's not a big difference between 22 and 25. So, yeah, I think the way he's performed over this last month and a half, however you want to break it down, I think there's a good chance he gets to 25 this season, despite what he's on pace for.
All right, we're going to take a break. Thanks so much to everybody who's watching on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you check us out, youtube.com/fantasybaseball today. We're here 12:45 to 1 in the morning most nights, Sunday through Thursday. So come hang out with us, jump in the chat, and we will take a quick break, and we'll be right back on Fantasy Baseball Today.
At CBS Sports Golazo Network, we're bringing you the game.
The madness of Messi arrives!
Breaking down the game.
This is unlike anything else in the world.
And changing the game.
Get it all for nil.
That means free.
Whoa.
And all day long!
24/7.
All right, we are back on Fantasy Baseball Today. And let's talk some news and notes on Tuesday. Dylan Cease and, I guess, Bailey Falter, you probably weren't starting him, but they got screwed by the weather today. The game was in Pittsburgh. It was clear that it was going to rain this evening, and for some reason they started anyway. And so Dylan Cease ended up pitching just one inning before the rain delay ended his start. Would expect that he's going to get bumped up in the rotation. Maybe, I think he was projected to start on Sunday. Maybe he starts Friday or Saturday now, and they treat this kind of like a bullpen day. But that was frustrating because there was no way they were going to be able to get through this game without a delay. And the fact that they got through an inning and a half before it was annoying. Another annoying thing, Grayson Rodriguez was scratched from his start Tuesday during warmups due to discomfort in his right lat. As of Tuesday evening, I haven't seen any signs of how significant this injury is, but it is worth noting that he missed time, pretty significant amount of time back in 2022 with a lat injury, which delayed his MLB debut. So there is some, so there is some, some precedent here. Not saying it's going to be that serious, but it's something to keep an eye on, I guess, as we move forward. And honestly, this is something you talked about. We're going to talk about some IL stashes later, but something you talked about in that column is like any injury at this point of the season basically can be a season ender. Even if it's not ultimately that serious, there's only 8 weeks left, a little under 8 weeks. So we'll hopefully find out more about Grayson Rodriguez on Wednesday. Mason Miller will return from the IL Wednesday as hoped. He got through that live batting practice session earlier in the week without issue. He's coming back from the fractured pinky in his non-throwing hand. So hopefully there won't be any issues for Mason Miller moving forward. He just goes right back to being an elite closer, and hopefully they use him more. He only pitched like 7 times in the month of July or something. His usage was really, really low. Maybe that was just they were blowing everyone out in July because they were averaging about 12 runs per game. But hopefully we see more from him. Starling Marte will start a minor league rehab assignment Wednesday at Low A St. Lucie. He's been working his way back from a bone bruise in his right knee. And the thing I want to keep an eye on, he'll probably be back in the majors sometime next week. I want to keep an eye on in the minors how much he runs, because he was having a pretty solid season before the injury, but obviously so much of Starling Marte's value is tied into his ability to steal bases. Luis Rengifo's season is done. He underwent season-ending wrist surgery on Tuesday. Was batting .300 with career-high 26 stolen bases, decent power before the injury. Should be healthy in time for the start of spring training. The Angels did activate Anthony Rendon from the IL on Wednesday, but they didn't play Tuesday. So the one thing we don't know is whether Zachary Neto will continue to hit at the top of the lineup for them or not, like he had with Luis Rengifo out. Byron Buxton missed his second straight game Tuesday against the White Sox as a result of running into the wall during Sunday's game. It's been diagnosed as a back injury, and I guess it wasn't quite as precautionary as they said. This is big news. Joe Musgrove will return from the IL at some point during the team's current road trip, though not during the current series in Pittsburgh. There's one series left in the road trip, so he's going to start sometime this weekend in Miami. He's been out since late May due to bone spurs in his right elbow. Start Joe Musgrove?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Roster?
I haven't heard much about it recently, but in June, there was talk of he's got to remake his delivery, like the way he lands and everything, because he's pitching through this bone spur in his elbow. And like I said, there hasn't been much update since then. So maybe that didn't end up having to happen, but that sounds like a big hurdle to clear, and I'm skeptical he'll clear it, quite frankly. And then he only made one rehab start after all that time away. That's bizarre too. I mean, we were about to have Eduardo Rodriguez come back from a season-long injury after no rehab starts. That start got rained out here tonight, so we'll see it on Wednesday instead. But that's bizarre too. Even more bizarre. Musgrove, though, with only one rehab start, still, it's like, I don't know.
Let him
maybe
prove
he'll go out. Maybe he'll go out and dominate. But I obviously can't predict the future. There are a lot of red flags here, though.
I agree. Justin Verlander will likely make a minor league rehab start this weekend at AAA if he can make it through another bullpen session Wednesday without incident. It's not clear how long he'll be down in the minors, but we've talked a little bit about Justin Verlander recently, and I'm at the point where I'm not really expecting him to be great. I'm hopeful that he can be pretty useful for fantasy, but I don't know if I want to expect anything from him. I don't know if I want to have a lot riding on Justin Verlander being very good the rest of the way. Yoshinobu Yamamoto made it through a bullpen session Tuesday and will likely face hitters for the first time since the injury in May. Sometime later this week. Still seems like maybe late August, but probably September is when he'll be back from the 60-day IL. Julio Rodriguez, we kind of got a non-update update. He's been cleared to do some light running in addition to on-field batting practice, but remains without a timetable to return from his high ankle injury. And as his absence continues to drag on, makes it more likely that he will need a rehab assignment. Right now, if he makes progress quickly in the coming days, maybe not, but that hasn't been determined yet. Clark Schmidt, coming back from a lat injury, pitched in a live batting practice session Tuesday and told reporters afterwards that he is willing to return in a bullpen role if that's what the Yankees need from him. I would be a little surprised if they went that way, just because Schmidt's return could give the Yankees either an opportunity to go with a 6-man rotation or just a way to skip some Luis Gil starts as they, presumably have to start managing his innings at some point, although that really hasn't happened yet. What do you expect from Clark Schmidt? Did he make the cut on the IL stash rankings?
Yeah, he's pretty low on it, but he made the top 45. If it becomes clear he's moving to the bullpen, then I don't have much reason to care about him. But he was having a breakout season prior to the injury, and I think there's enough time for him to build up, make 4 or 5 starts before the season's done, and they may be useful ones. We'll see if the Yankees end up doing what he's suggesting here and moving him to the bullpen.
The Diamondbacks placed catcher Gabriel Moreno on the IL Tuesday with a left adductor strain and selected the contract of Adrian Del Castillo from AAA. Castillo is not a big-name prospect. He's a 24-year-old who has hit really, really well at AAA this season. 319 average, an OPS over 1,000. It's the Pacific Coast League. Do they play in Albuquerque?
No, they play in Reno.
Reno, that another elevated.
Yeah, no, it's
very good offensive environment. But is Del Castillo worth a look in 2 catcher leagues?
I would say so. I'm more excited about him than I was Dylan Dingler, who hasn't done much yet for the Tigers.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I've been a little... I found it a little odd that all the hype Davison De Los Santos has gotten, of course, recently traded to the Marlins, but he was in the same system with Adrian Del Castillo, and they both are having huge years, and Del Castillo wasn't getting mentioned, and Davison De Los Santos was getting a ton of attention, and I didn't really understand that because it seems to me Davison De Los Santos' flaws are clearer. It is likely that De Los Santos stats have been elevated by
Del Castillo.
Del Castillo, yeah. Adrian Del Castillo, the catcher. It does seem likely that his numbers have been elevated by the environment, but 90.7 mile per hour average exit velocity, 111 mile per hour max exit velocity. Those are quality exit velocity readings. And then unlike De Los Santos, he doesn't have the super high chase rate.
Yeah, only a 17% strikeout rate.
Right. The strikeout rate is good. He walks a lot too. I think the main reason he doesn't show up high on prospect list, Del Castillo, is because he's a bad catcher and probably is not going to last there long term. But clearly the Diamondbacks are willing to give him a shot now with Gabriel Moreno out.
And hey, all we care about is that he plays. We don't care where he plays as long as he has that catcher eligibility. So that's one thing to keep an eye on moving forward. I think in deeper two catcher leagues, Adrian Del Castillo, definitely worth adding. Michael Harris set to begin a rehab assignment Tuesday at AAA with the hopes that he will be ready to return when first eligible from the 60-day IL on August 14th. This one almost feels like he probably could have come back a few days earlier, but it was like they were far enough away that they needed the 40-man spot and they put him on there. But it does sound like Michael Harris will be back next week. So we should get 7 glorious weeks at the end of the season for him to make up some ground.
6.5. 6.5.
6.5.
I don't
glorious
think he's eligible
weeks
to return until Wednesday of next week.
Yeah, it's the 14th.
Yeah.
Kyle Freeland left Tuesday's start against the Mets with a blister on his left index finger. Kerry Carpenter will begin a minor league rehab assignment Tuesday at AAA. Riley Green could be right behind him. He was doing batting practice on the field Tuesday as he returns from his hamstring injury. Taylor Ward was placed on the paternity leave list Tuesday and will likely miss a couple games. Reese Olson began a throwing program. He could still have a chance to return from the IL, coming back from that shoulder injury. It might be really late. Did he make the IL stash list?
Reese Olson? Yeah, he did.
Okay. The Astros promoted infielder Zach DeZenzo, I believe that's how you pronounce that name, from AAA Tuesday. Only played 11 games at AAA before getting called up. He was hitting .391 with 4 homers and 3 steals, has been a big riser since starting the season in High A. Any interest in adding Zach DeZenzos?
Well, I was trying to get a read on how much he's going to play. I do think he's been kind of a forgotten prospect this year because of time missed to injury. Baseball Prospectus loved him last year and actually had him in their preseason top 100. But even they left him out of the midseason list just because he was unavailable. But yeah, a lot of the supporting numbers, of course, you mentioned the surface level numbers were good. And admittedly, a very small sample at AAA, but 109.9 max exit velocity, 89.4 average exit velocity, 19% K rate. You know, all of those are fine. All of those are solid, and I think Zach DeZenzo. Now we're seeing him earlier than I expected, and it's going to make for a really good audition with Alex Bregman entering free agency this offseason to see if Zach DeZenzo could just take over there for the Astros next year. I think the way he performs down the stretch is going to say a lot, and I think he should play a lot, given that it doesn't look like they have anybody better to occupy the DH spot.
All right. The Yankees and Angels were rained out on Tuesday, pushing Luis Gil back a day, giving Will Warren a chance to start game 2 of a doubleheader on Wednesday. The Diamondbacks were also pushed back in their game with Guardians. So I think that was supposed to be the Eduardo Rodriguez, Carlos Carrasco matchup. That will be happening on Wednesday as well. So we've got 17 games on Wednesday. Big slate. James McCann underwent a nasal reduction realignment procedure as a result of the broken nose that he suffered and played through last week after getting hit by a pitch. He is somehow not on the IL, which is wild. Having surgery and not going on the IL, that's something. Matt Brash has been cleared to start a throwing program. His season is over as he tries to work his way back from Tommy John surgery, but he has closer upside if he can get ready. By the start of next season, obviously he would be behind Andres Munoz in the pecking order, but someone to keep an eye on for next year. Christian Scott still has not been cleared to resume throwing since being shut down in July with his right UCL sprain. There is hope that clearance could come in the coming days. And he did say he's not ruling out pitching this season, but I'm not expecting any kind of impact from him, especially given that he was pretty mediocre before the injury. So I'm sure he didn't make the IL stash rankings.
He did not. Christian Scott did not. And, we'll see how this goes. But like you, I'm skeptical he's going to be able to avoid the surgery he's trying to avoid.
All right, and then Elliot Ramos returned from his thumb injury to go 2 for 5 with a steal and a homer. Just his second home run in 15 games since the All-Star break, but good to see him back in the lineup. That thumb's been bothering him for a little while, so that might explain the downturn in production. And before we take our second break, let's go through the dropometer real quick. I think some of these guys are fairly easy calls in one way or the other, and we'll start with Clayton Kershaw, who pitched well on Tuesday. 4 2/3 innings, gave up 1 earned run against a very good Phillies lineup, 5 strikeouts, generated 9 of his 10 swinging strikes with the curveball and slider. Velocity pretty good, but he's not worth starting. And how droppable is a guy that you can't really start yet?
Well, I think you are going to start him next week because he lines up for 2 starts against the Brewers and Cardinals. And so I think you're going to start him, and you're just going to hope that they finally let him go the minimum of 5 innings, maybe even 6 innings. If it doesn't happen this week, then I think maybe we could talk about it. Next week, I mean, if it doesn't happen next week, him going the minimum required for a win, then I think maybe we could talk about it at that point. That is my biggest concern. I think he's been effective. He certainly
2 of the 3 starts have been very good.
And I think he's basically looked like Clayton Kershaw. But last year, when he came back from an IL stint because the shoulder was bothering him, and of course he hadn't had it operated on yet, he made 8 starts, and none of them exceeded 83 pitches. And that's kind of the mark he's been reaching in this 3-start stint since returning from the IL. 81 was what he threw in this start against the Phillies. So if that's just how they're going to handle Clayton Kershaw going forward, obviously that's going to be a problem. But again, I will stress that in those 8 starts last year, when he came back from the IL, he hadn't had the shoulder operated on yet. So I think he was more forced to limit his workload then than he is now. And now it's just part of a buildup, and he hasn't taken the next step in the buildup yet. That's what I'm hoping. Next week should be pretty revealing.
All right. What about 1, 2 on the dropometer?
Kershaw, I want to say 0, but I'll say 1 just for the super shallow leagues.
All right. Jeffrey Springs struggled again in his second start back from Tommy John surgery. 5 innings pitched, 4 earned runs, 3 walks, 3 strikeouts. Velocity was up a little bit from his first outing, but still down from 2023. Just getting hit hard, not getting whiffs. His fastball, 94.7 mile per hour average exit velocity on 7 balls in play, 0 swings and misses on 34 fastballs. And then that seems to be the long and short of it right now, is the fastball's not there. And this is against the Marlins and Cardinals that he struggled in his first 2 starts. Where are you at on Jeffrey Springs on the dropometer?
Still pretty low, I think, at 2, because, at least there's impact potential here. And after his first start, Rays manager Kevin Cash said he thought the velocity would spike in the next couple outings. And we did see it go up nearly a mile per hour in this one. Still not quite back where it needs to be, but it was improvement for Jeffrey Springs. And I want to hold out a little longer. It's been a long wait for him. I'm not saying you need to start him. Let me see if he lines up for 2 starts next week. So it looks like he does not. So you can afford to wait another week and see if Springs improves from that.
So that's a 2. All right. I think the worst song I've ever heard in my life is Hey Soul Sister. And that's the song that the Bird was singing on Tuesday. You see what I did there? Hayden Bird's song gave up 7 earned runs in 2 innings against the Nationals, 3 walks, 1 strikeout. That was after, of course, 20 strikeouts in 11 innings in his previous 2 outings, including just absolutely massive swing and miss numbers. I will point out 3 of the runs that he gave up were on a pitch that CJ Abrams homered on that he had no business homering on. Did you see this?
Yeah.
It was like
up at his eyes,
chin high, out over, like on the corner of the strike zone, like on the far end of the strike zone, like around his head, and he hit it out. It was one of the most bonkers home runs I've seen, but where are we at in Hayden Burns' song on the dropometer after this one?
Well, it was definitely discouraging after this was the first start where we had assurance Birdsong has a job and he's going to stay in the rotation, and he was lined up for 2 starts, and a ton of people probably started him. I think he was the top sleeper pitcher for this week, so there's one that didn't work out. It was discouraging, and I'm going to go a little higher on the dropometer just because he's given you an excuse to drop him now. I don't think many people are going to be clamoring for him, especially in the shallow leagues where it's even in question whether you drop him. So I'm gonna put it at like a 4 or a 5. I still think there's a lot of talent there, but command is a problem. It was a problem throughout the minors. It's the reason why Hayden Birdsong wasn't some highly. I mean, he was a prospect, but he wasn't like a super high end prospect. Yeah. And he threw only 58% of his pitches for strikes in this one. Now, the previous 2, the really good 2 starts, even that was just 62% strikes. Still not a great rate. He still walked 5 in those 11 innings. I'm talking about the 2 good starts for Birdsong.
And that was with like 50 total swinging strikes across the 2 starts.
Right. So this has been a continual issue.
Yeah.
And even though he has a lot of swing and miss potential, I think it's going to make him erratic going forward.
All right, and then I think this is the easy drop on the dropometer. Max Meyer got the Reds today, 6 earned runs on 8 hits, 3 walks, only 2 strikeouts. They say man cannot live on bread alone, and Max Meyer cannot live on sliders alone. That's basically all he's got. 5 of his 6 swinging strikes were on the slider. His fastball's down a bit from 2022. I'm going to say a 10 on the dropometer.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I don't see any reason to hold on to Max Meyer at this point. I mean, the odds are already so long. Let's see where I moved him in the rankings. I moved him to 100th, and even that still feels
it feels a little high.
Too high. Yeah. Yep.
All right. We are going to move on. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back on Fantasy Baseball Today.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
And we are back, and there are just under 8 weeks left in the season. Let's talk about the top IL stashes, and it becomes increasingly difficult to justify stashing anyone but the highest end players. So that's what we're going to focus on here. Scott, how deep did you end up going on the top IL stashes in your column on CBS Sports?
I went 45 deep, which is less than what it's usually been this season. This season, I've been having to go 50 deep every time I published it to get all the worthwhile names in there. I will note that in years past, I've usually only had to go like 40 deep. So this year has been worse for injuries and to fantasy relevant players. But some of the long-term stashes have been eliminated because they're out for the season now. Mike Trout, Evan Carter, and then some others who aren't officially ruled out.
Jesus Lazari, like we talked about yesterday.
Right, guys who are confirmed not to have enough time to build up. There was no reason to include them either, I didn't feel like. So, yeah, it was just 45.
And yet, still 45.
Still 45, yeah.
Make sure you go check out the full article on CBSSports.com. Scott also wrote the latest bullpen report, ranking the latest moves and shakeups on the bullpen front. So make sure you check that out on CBSSports.com/fantasy/baseball. We'll just very quickly run through the top. These are the guys that you said are must stashes, pretty much in all formats. And too much upside to drop.
Yeah, and so I kind of explained this in the article, but I want to do it in a shorter form here on the podcast because obviously there's room for disagreement in how I make out these rankings. But I've decided that even with the calendar shrinking on us and those kind of unclear timetables presenting more of an issue because the calendar is shrinking on us, I still think the most stashable injured players are the most impactful ones, the most high-end players, the ones who could actually be difference makers, because it's a question of, okay, what do you do with this guy when he comes off the IL? And if it's a fringy guy who
you might drop anyway, yeah.
You might just drop him anyway, and then what was the point of using your IL spot on him? So that's why you're going to see names like Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and Max Scherzer still pretty high. I don't know that we're going to cover Max Scherzer today.
Yeah, he's in the second.
He's in the next category. But if you were to look at the article, he might be higher on the list than some pitchers with nearer timetables like a Lance Lynn, for instance.
All right, so we'll start off with Mookie Betts, who should be back next week. He's going to play shortstop. He's going to hit second. I did note that they are going to leave Shohei Ohtani at the top of the order, and that's an interesting one because he's been running a lot more, obviously, since Mookie Betts' injury, and I wonder if that's now likely to continue or if he's going to slow down a bit when it's Mookie Betts batting behind him instead of Teoscar Hernandez, who's a good hitter, but a little more all or nothing than Mookie Betts, to the point where it kind of makes sense to try to get that extra base.
Yeah.
The next two super high-end players, and really the next three, but very little timetable on any of them. Kyle Tucker coming back from that bruised shin, Fernando Tatis, the stress reaction to his femur, and Julio Rodriguez with the high ankle sprain. I think I expect Julio Rodriguez back sooner just because his injury was less significant, but I really, there's a chance none of these guys are back until September, right?
There's a chance of that. Yeah. I think Rodriguez and Tatis might have the murkier timelines than Tucker at this point. And I realize it's funny to say because Tucker's timeline's been pushed back constantly. But the last report was they think he'll be back before September.
Well, there was the quote from Joe Espada yesterday, though, where he said, I don't think I can say he'll be back before September, which is not saying he won't be.
Okay.
They've
okay.
just...
Their GM said differently, but fair enough. With Rodriguez, it's a high ankle sprain, which we don't see much in baseball. But like changing directions is the issue with that. And he's begun linear running. He's begun swinging a bat. But I think the changing directions is going to take a lot longer and could potentially take most of the season still. Or not. And so the reason you stash him is in the hope it doesn't. It's not a clear timetable, though, which is why...
Superstars.
Right. These are superstars. And so you're just holding out that hope for Tucker, Tatis, and J-Rod.
The next three have pretty clear timetables. Riley Green, Christian Walker, and Michael Harris should all be back within the next 2 weeks. I would say Michael Harris having the clearest timetable, Walker probably the furthest, and Riley Green, I could see if he progresses quickly the next couple of days, him starting a rehab assignment and being back next week, but that's very speculative on my part. Christian Yelich, that's another one that we just don't know. I mean, he's a darn near a superstar this season when he was playing, but this back injury, which has been an issue for 3 or 4 years now, might need off-season surgery. A lot of unknowns there. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Jared Jones, big-time starting pitchers coming back from a shoulder and lat injury, but it sounds like Jones is probably ahead, should be back before the end of the month, it sounds like. So Yamamoto's probably the better player, but Jones coming back soon. Mason Miller, you're only going to have to stash for about 6 more hours by the time you listen to this. So that's good news. Ranger Suarez threw a bullpen session Monday. I think he's going to throw another one on Thursday. Could return next week. Iffy on how impactful he'll be, given that he was starting to regress before the injury and has been struggling since the initial back injury in June, but has been so good this season on the whole.
Right. You so want to just dismiss him at this point, and I
don't want to.
You want to. You want. I don't think anybody who has Ranger Suarez could be compelled to drop him at this point, given how big of a part of the team he's been. And it does seem like this is a fairly minor injury. It's just you're anticipating some regression, and I am too, enough that I wouldn't want him on my roster, and I wouldn't.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And then Tristan Casas and Carlos Correa. Tristan Casas has begun his rehab assignment from that cartilage tear in his rib. Carlos Correa coming back from plantar fasciitis in a different foot than the one that wrecked his 2023 season. He's been able to jog, but he hasn't been able to sprint. So that'll be the last big hurdle before Carlos Correa can come back. So hopefully we'll see both of those guys within the next 2 weeks, I think is a reasonable expectation. And let's move on to some more of Tuesday's standouts. Let's talk about some waiver wire pitchers, and a heck of a performance from Albert Suarez on Tuesday night. Did not know he was going to be starting until Grayson Rodriguez got hurt in warmups, and he went out against the Blue Jays in Toronto, 5 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. Is he someone you want to be adding if Grayson Rodriguez is going to miss time?
Look, he's got a good offense behind him. I'm just not sure he's very good. And his previous 4 appearances, Albert Suarez, he had a 10.80 ERA, and I was basically done with him even before the Orioles were. So he comes back, has a decent effort here. I don't know that I want to get back on the bandwagon.
All right, we've got Tyler Mahle, who made his return from Tommy John surgery and was fine. 1 earned run, 5 hits over 5 innings, 2 strikeouts, 1 walk. The velocity wasn't far off from where it was last season when he pitched, but that's not really the baseline we're looking for from Mahle, because the one time he's really been a must-start pitcher was in 2021. We had 3.75 ERA, 210 strikeouts, and he averaged 94 miles per hour with his 4-seamer. It was down to 92.2 on Tuesday. Was his first start back. Is Tyler Mahle someone, is he below Jeffrey Springs and Clayton Kershaw on your priority list?
Yeah, he is. But I was more encouraged by this start than not. Mm-hmm. I would have liked for there to be more strikeouts and more swinging strikes, and I think there will need to be for Tyler Mahle to be worthwhile. You mentioned the fastball velocity. The splitter velocity, which is his main swing and miss pitch, it actually was back to the velocity from 2021 when he had 210 strikeouts and 13 wins and a 3.75 ERA. Clearly his best season, what we're all hoping he can get back to. So I found that encouraging. I don't know if the slide, I mean, probably you want him to see him get that velocity back up on his fastball too. But just given the way the splitter played, I think there's room for optimism here for Tyler Mahle that he's going to be more useful than, frankly, I thought he'd be making this late season return.
All right, let's talk about Colin Ray, 75% rostered in 71% rostered in CBS Sports Leagues, 9 strikeouts over 7 shutout innings. Shouts to Scott. You said you could see him having a good start against the Braves. Is 71% rostered right on line. That's kind of how I feel, where I don't really buy it, but he's been useful enough for a while that I'm okay with it. But like the 92 strikeouts or 9 strikeouts, excuse me, didn't come with a significant increase in velocity or a pitch mix change or even a lot of whiffs, only 10 on 92 pitches. He has a 5.92 xERA. I know he's been very useful for fantasy. I'm not looking to go out and add Colin Ray even after this very good start.
No, I'm not. I would guess that it jumped to 71% this week because he was in line for 2 starts, and I had him on my sleeper pitchers list. He was pretty low on it, and I've sometimes joke that 10 is too many to come up with, so there are going to be some bad pitchers on there, some ones I don't actually believe in. And so Ray would probably have fit into that category to whatever degree you want to give me credit for the pick. But I did watch him in this start. I may have been the first time I've ever watched Colin Ray, and that guy can dot the corners. Like, and I wonder if that's a skill that's unaccounted for. And I think it's probably difficult to sustain that level of command for any pitcher. I mean, maybe he could do it for a while. That was kind of the discussion with Ranger Suarez early this season. But I do wonder if maybe that's not something all the ERA estimators, because we've pointed those out for Colin Ray, how they're in the high 4s and how he has to regress because of that and blah, blah, blah. I still don't have a ton of belief in him. It just, I kind of feel the same way about Ronaldo Lopez. Like, man, this guy is able to locate his pitches in such a way that he's able to avoid maximum damage. I just wonder if there's something to that. That's all.
So I think what you're aiming at is there is a difference between something being a fluke, which it's not, right? Like if you are like, I think Ranger Suarez is the canonical example of this that I'm going to use until the end of time, where what he was doing at the first half of this season was not a fluke. He was pitching incredibly well, but there is a difference between something not being a fluke and something being unsustainable. And that is, I think, the difference, where what Suarez was doing was earned, right? Like he was earning the results he was getting. It just probably wasn't sustainable for him to keep pitching that way, because like Zach Greinke is like the one guy over the past like 20 years who has consistently been an ace pitching that way, just dotting the corners over and over and over and having, 80 grade command, right? Like the difference between even really good, like 60 grade command and 80 grade command, like Zach Greinke had, is the difference between being a Hall of Famer and being a guy like Ranger Suarez who flits in and out of being a must-start fantasy option. And I think that's probably Colin Ray's a lower scale version of that even. So I think 71% is probably about the ceiling of where he needs to be rostered.
And to a degree, even if a pitcher has this amazing command, you would think the ERA estimators would account for that, because xERA measures quality of contact, right? And obviously all of them measure walk rate. I'm not so much talking about walk rate as where exactly you're locating your strikes, right? But you would think quality of contact would be compromised if you are putting them, if you are dotting the corners and living on the edge and able to succeed that way. But I don't know. It might be an area that deserves increased study from people who are more inclined to do that than I am.
All right, we got 2 more waiver wire pitchers to talk about. One I think is fairly easy to dismiss. That's Jonathan Cannon, who has had decent results at times this season. I just don't really see any reason to be excited about him, given that he's on the worst team in baseball. Did get a win today. The first White Sox pitcher to get a win in 21 games. So way to go there, but don't see any reason to go out and add him. But I do think Cater Montero for the Tigers is fairly interesting. He's been pretty bad in his first taste of the majors, but was really good tonight. 1 earned run over 6 innings against the Mariners. It's the Mariners, the most strikeout prone history in Major League Baseball team in Major League Baseball history. And he struck out 8 while walking 1, but I will point out that both the slider and changeup have been pretty good swing and miss pitches for him this season. They both have whiff rates over 30%, and he got 12 swinging strikes on 85 pitches today. Is there anything here with Cater Montero of the Tigers?
I mean, it's sort of the same thing I've been pointing out for Tobias Myers all year. Of course, Myers has had success, and Montero hadn't until this start. I think it's too little to make anything of it yet, but there will if Montero were to go on a run, there would be more to buy into there than like what we're seeing with Jonathan Cannon, who allowed just one hit in his previous start and followed it up with a great start here. I just don't see anything he excels at. He was a good ground ball pitcher in the minors, but that hasn't really carried over to the majors. So I don't know how Jonathan Cannon's succeeding.
All right, let's move on to a segment I'm going to continue to call Aces of Varying Degrees of Quality and Effectiveness. Luis Castillo, 6 innings, quality start, 3 earned runs. You'd like better against Detroit, but 9 strikeouts. That was nice to see. And he had the fastball working for him, got 6 swinging strikes on 14 swings, added 5 more with the slider. And the fastball's been the thing this season, where if you're wondering why Luis Castillo hasn't been as effective this year, some of it's worse results on balls in play. A lot of it's just that the fastball has gone from the best swing and miss four-seamer in baseball to just a good one. And today was a little better. Actually, I think it was like a 40% whiff rate. That's very good. So that's something to keep an eye on. Pablo Lopez, 5 innings, 4 earned runs, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts. I know that some of you are probably still pretty jumpy about Pablo Lopez's poor start to the season. He had been really good for like 6 or 7 starts before this one. The one thing I will point out, even when he was struggling earlier in the season, he was still getting a lot of swinging strikes and still getting a lot of strikeouts. He had, I think, 6 swinging strikes on 88 pitches, none with the sweeper or the curveball today. So I think this is truly, more than any time we've seen this season, a night where Pablo Lopez just didn't have it. And that is actually less concerning for me, because I think you can just write it off as he'll have it next time, right? Is that, Am I just being too optimistic?
No, I think it's as simple as he was just allowing too many home runs earlier and got it under control. And previous 6 starts, 2.84 ERA, 0.92 WHIP, 11.4 K per 9. When you're on that kind of run, I'll accept a hiccup like this, which wasn't even like a total disaster start.
Shota Imanaga, 7 innings, 2 hits, 2 earned runs, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts in this one. He kind of, like, him and Justin Steele have a lot of similarities in that it's like fastballs up. For Steele, it's the slider. For Imanaga, it's the splitter, just burying the splitter below the zone. Nothing complicated about it, but what both of them do is they'll change up the shape and approach of their pitches in various counts. Imanaga, if you look at the pitch mix, he throws a splitter. But if you actually watch him pitch, I saw a great breakdown of this on Twitter. I can't remember who it was. I'm sorry, but they showed he's got his traditional splitter. He's got like a Vulcan changeup like this. And then he's got just like a traditional changeup that he'll throw. And they all kind of just get jumbled in for the most part as they splitter, but they give hitters a different look. And it's mostly just the classic splitter. But that's one thing that he does share with Justin Steele, where it's fastball slider for Justin Steele, but they're all different. Like the slider sometimes is more cut, sometimes more sweep. And so I don't know. I was worried that the fly ball heavy approach and how much he pounds the strike zone with the fastball, especially up, was going to lead to some issues for Imanaga. But outside of like one bad stretch, he's just been incredible this season. And that splitter is a legitimately special pitch.
Well, I have a slightly different take here on Imanaga, because what I take from this start is it was encouraging to see that Shota Imanaga can still do something like this, because we haven't seen a lot of it lately. And I actually think this season has played out for Imanaga exactly like we thought it would. So the ball was carrying so little at the start of the year that he ended up suppressing home runs more than we thought. And so in his first, let me see, I lost the stat. I had it right here. Okay, yeah, in his first 9 starts, Imanaga allowed just 3 home runs, which led to a .84 ERA, because that's his big vulnerability, home runs. 3 and 9 starts for a .84 ERA. The next 11 starts, so the 11 prior to this one, 13 home runs and a .503 ERA. So the ball started carrying better, as it was always going to in the summer months, but to a higher degree than maybe we even planned for. And it's made Imanaga much more susceptible to bad starts, and yet he still has that great splitter. If he's able to avoid the long ball, he's still capable of doing something like this. I just think it's going to be more volatile moving forward.
Well, I will point out that the damage was largely in June. In July and the first start in August before this one, he had a .315 ERA with 34 strikeouts, 3 walks in 31 and a third innings. And that was with 6 home runs. So,
right.
Well, no, you're right that the home runs have been an issue. It's just he's good enough at everything else that he's been able to.
I got the larger sample, though.
Yeah.
I know.
But I'm just saying, like, in terms of the ERA, it's only been really the one bad month.
So he had 2 really good starts in July and 1 barely quality start and 1 not so good start. And that added up to a .315 ERA. It wasn't the consistency we were seeing from Imanaga earlier in the year.
Yeah, I'm not saying I never bought the sub 2 ERA or whatever it was through the end of May. But like a low 3s ERA, I think that's like I've comped him to my mind just went completely blank.
Joe Ryan.
Joe Ryan.
Yeah, no, I think that's still the comp. I think that's still the comp. Low 3s ERA that from this point forward is possible, but I think it'll be closer to mid 3s.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's move on to Sonny Gray, who was very good. Nice bounce back start. And the interesting thing was, even when he was struggling in July, it wasn't really that he was getting killed with homers. It wasn't. He had 1 really bad start, and he had 4 home runs in 1 start. But other than that, he gave up 1 start in his other, or 1 homer in his other starts, generating a bunch of strikeouts still, not really walking anyone. And then so far in the month of August, 7 innings in both starts, 2 earned runs allowed in both starts, 15 strikeouts, 2 walks. I know Sonny Gray has been defined by inconsistency in his career, and that will probably always be an issue. But this was one season where when things started going sideways, I never really worried about it. And the fact that he's bounced back, right in line with what I expected.
Yeah. Yeah, I have him as top 20 rest of the way.
Same.
I've moved Zach Gallen behind Sonny Gray. Actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some hitters before we move on to the end of the show. We'll get to the bullpens as well. Isaac Paredes hit his first home run since joining the Cubs. It was only 8 games, and this was a 364-foot home run that would have been out in 28 of 30 home ballparks. But, 5 for 30, 1 home run since joining the Cubs. It has not gone great. Small sample size. How worried are you?
My opinion hasn't changed. I think he's not going to be as good as with the Rays, and I think there's the potential for that venue change given his extreme profile, the way he has to pull his home runs right down the line, and that Wrigley Field is deeper there. I think it has the potential to outright ruin Isaac Paredes. 8-game sample, as bad as it's been, isn't enough to say one way or the other.
James Wood had a very, very good game today. 2 for 3 with a couple of walks, 4 runs, a triple, and a big 423-foot home run. He's on a little 6-game hitting streak, 340 ex-Wobo over the past 50 plate appearances. Just some signs that James Wood is starting to figure it out. And honestly, like, he is by far from being a finished product, and he's keeping his head above water. That's what you want to see with a talented young player like that, because, man, when it all comes together, it's going to be really impressive.
Yeah. Look what we're seeing from Jackson Holiday now. 3rd home run.
Exactly, yeah.
Coming back after looking inept, frankly, as a hitter. His first stint in April.
Yeah, 50% strikeout rate in April. Willy Adames for the Brewers, 4 for 5, 2 home runs, 4 RBI, 2 runs. Has an OPS north of 900 since July after a miserable month of June. So it's good to see him bouncing back. Dansby Swanson went 3 for 4 with a run and a triple. Do you have any hope the rest of the way?
Oh, it's fading. I've held out hope for a long time, and it's fading. I finally made a move in my rankings with Dansby Swanson that I'm sure all the listeners will say is long overdue because they don't have the patience of an analyst. But I dropped Dansby Swanson behind Xavier Edwards.
It's reasonable.
Ceddanne Rafaela.
Mm-hmm.
I still have him ahead of like Jeremy Pena, but nobody's that excited about Jeremy Pena.
All right, Michael Conforto, 2 for 4 with a home run and 3 RBI, 2 home runs in his last 4 games, and actually having a solid bounce back season. It's just you'd probably notice it more if he played in a better home park for a left-handed hitter. Oracle Park is one of the toughest places in baseball for left-handed hitters to hit, especially for power. And this is a team that I believe, this is still true, has not had a 30 home run season since Barry Bonds. That is one of my favorite fun facts in Major League Baseball right now.
Yeah, I believe you're right.
I noticed someone in the chat.
And they won 3 World Series during that time. It's worth noting.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I noticed someone in the chat very early on, maybe before we even started, said we need to show Masataka Yoshida more respect. So let's put a little respect on Masataka Yoshida's name. 2 for 5 with a home run, 3 RBI. You know, it's weird because when we think of streaky hitters, we think of like a Teoscar Hernandez, like free swinging types who just get really hot and can carry you and then get really cold. Jorge Soler might be a better example of that. But Masataka Yoshida has been like either a 900 OPS bat or a 500 OPS bat in his career. And it's just, he goes through these like month-long stretches where he just alternates them. But hitting well over 300 since July 1st, 6 hits over his past 2 games, showing a little love to Masataka Yoshida, who is batting cleanup and playing DH every day for the Red Sox. And then Tyler Stevenson is 56% rostered. That's too low, right? He went 2 for 5 with a home run today. His 3rd in the past 4 games, 8 over the past 22 games. He's got a playing time edge on most of the catching position. Tyler Stevenson has been pretty good. It's like a mid to low 700s OPS bat, but for a catcher who plays more regularly than most, I just think he should be more than 56% rostered. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I have him 13th among catchers.
There you go. That's way better than 56% rostered.
I would think. I'm pulling up the catcher roster rates because I actually suspect there aren't many 2-catcher leagues on CBS.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is going to keep that number down for Tyler Stevenson. How many catchers are rostered in more than 56% of leagues is what I'm looking for. 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15. So he's the 16th most rostered catcher, and
you'd rather have him than David Fry or Ben Rice, right?
Yeah, I would say so at this point. But
rather have him than Jonah Heim.
Come to decide that, and actually, those 3, Fry, Rice, and Stevenson, have the exact same roster rate.
Yeah,
more than
you'd
Jonah
rather
Heim.
have him.
Yes.
Ryan Jeffers.
No, I have Jeffers ahead.
Okay.
But not
What about
strongly.
Shea Langoliers?
I'd rather have Langoliers.
What about Sean Murphy?
I have Stevenson ahead of Murphy just because of the playing time issue there.
Well, those guys are all more rostered than him, so go drop them and add Tyler Stevenson. Why don't you? All right, bullpen updates. Chad Green got the save for Toronto. Ryan Helsley got his 35th save. Allowed 2 hits and a run. He's allowed 4 earned runs over his past 3 outings. Still leads the majors in saves. No concerns with Ryan Helsley, right?
No concerns.
Josh Hader came out for the final out for his 23rd save. Kenley Jansen struck out 3 for his 21st. Victor Vodnik got his 6th save with 1 hit allowed. Bo Brisky came out for the save in the 9th inning for the Tigers after Jason Foley worked the 8th. But he had to be bailed out by Tyler Holton, who actually has I think it's 4 or 6 saves this season for the Tigers, but Tyler Holton, usually a multi-inning guy. He's a lefty. I think it's very unlikely that he's going to be the closer here. Is anyone?
No, I don't think anybody deserves to be the closer, frankly, in the Tigers bullpen. And it seems like AJ Hinch is just done with Jason Foley in that role.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's going to be a big mess going forward.
The Philadelphia Phillies did not get a save on Tuesday night, but that was because they scored 2 runs in the 9th inning. They were leading 4-2 before that, and they went Matt Strahm in a big situation in the 7th inning. Totally makes sense. Jeff Hoffman in the 8th, and Carlos Estevez did pitch the 9th, did not get the save, but clearly that was the plan, right? That they were going to give Carlos Estevez the save there. We think he's the closer for the Phillies, right?
I mean, they've made it pretty clear. So when they acquired Estevez, Dave Dombrowski said it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a lot of 9th innings, which isn't conclusive, but it's in that direction. And then more recently, Rob Thompson, the manager, who technically is the one making that decision. I don't have the exact quote, but he said he'd only consider using Estevez in the 8th. Meaning not the 9th. He'd only consider using Estevez in the 8th if there were a bunch of lefties due up in the 9th. So he actually said he didn't want to call him the closer, but just because he didn't want to put that on somebody. But he basically said Estevez is the closer. And Estevez has only worked the 9th inning since coming over, except for one time when the 9th inning continued into the 10th, and he worked part of the 10th too.
And I'm realizing someone in the chat pointed out, I did not say Chad Green's name when I said the Blue Jays closer, but Chad Green is the Blue Jays closer at this point. There's no questions about that. So apologies for, I guess, only saying Green earlier. To stream or not to stream for Wednesday, not a bunch of great options here. I don't really think I want to stream anyone on Wednesday if we're not counting
Chris,
I think Brandon Fott and Ben Lively are probably both rostered too much, but I like both of them if they're available.
Relatively speaking, yeah.
You're
forcing me to pick one.
Joey Estes.
Right. That's what I was going to say, just because he's going against the White Sox, which, by the way, that didn't work out so well for Ross Stripling, who
good call
ended their losing streak. But I think Joey Estes is a little better than Ross Stripling. And if I'm forced to stream somebody from our usual rostership range that day, I think it would be Estes.
Thursday has some better options. Kyle Harrison has a good matchup against Washington. They've been bad against lefties all season. DJ Hers, decent matchup against San Francisco. He's had some upside.
Very boomer bust.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to go with Frankie Montas, although the Braves are not a great offense right now.
I believe that'll be his second start with the Brewers, and there's a chance they could rekindle something in Montas. I don't think he's so far gone when you look under the hood that he can't be redeemed, but I wouldn't be willing to bet on it after what he showed in his first start with the Brewers. So it's not looking like a great day Thursday either. I think Kyle Gibson.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It might be my favorite.
Yeah. And my second might be Dean Kramer at the Blue Jays, though it's not with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer that one if he was at home. I think I would go Kyle Harrison and DJ Hers over Dean Kramer if I had to stream someone on Thursday. But I'd rather not. And that's going to do it for Fantasy Baseball today. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Chris. Thanks for always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.